Okay, so panel discussions.
Yes.
Because I always thought that. What is your approach of handling multiple people on a panel? Because you have a very limited amount of time.
Yes.
But you want to give everybody kind of breath and title together. So how do you approach balancing when you have multiple panels?
It's doing all your preparation beforehand and then being really kind of loosey-goosey in the moment. And then I also like to give structure to the panels. Like sometimes, when I'm working with Impact and they give me questions for everyone, I'll just be like, hey, everyone, we're going to start at the end of the table and come back here. Or we're going to start with the person next to me and go down. And in this panel, everyone had so many brilliant insights to get that we were running kind of tight on time. So one thing I did on our, like when we were asking what advice would you give to filmmakers in the audience, I was like, do it in one sentence. Did everyone do it in one sentence? Not really. Some people, the composers were great, and then it just kind of went from there. But it was, at least what I try to do, especially when there's a time limit and you want everyone to have their moment to shine, is try to give some loose structure. So, because also as the moderator and of this type of panel, it's not just you and I talking,
right,
which we could do all day.
Yeah.
Trying to give some structure and some framework, because you're the leader here, and you're the host in a way. So just knowing that, hey, this is what I need from you, and then give it to me so I can get it from the other people, and no one feels slighted.
Now, if you have a solo guest for a long period of time, that's a much different approach because you have to actually have them carry it.
Yes.
For a longer period. So how do you approach that differently? Because if you have something where you got to give them 10, 12 questions,
right.
That's good.
I think it's actually the same principle, but then it's a little less structure. Like I want to do all my research, I want to do the deep dive, I want to have my stuff prepped, and then I kind of want to forget it and just have a engaging, interesting conversation. Because I don't think it makes, you would know this too, it doesn't make for an interesting conversation if I ask you a question, you say something really interesting, and I just look at my note card and ask what I've prepared. So when you just have one guest in a longer period of time, for me it's all about just playing, having an interesting, engaging conversation and really listening to what the person's saying.
Yeah, I find not all moderators do that.
Yeah.
They don't respond to especially if they say something awkward and you go back to it.
Yeah, well, I think that was what we were doing. I'm sorry, my other panelists are yonder. And I think that's something I really try to do with moderating, instead of just being answer, next question, is kind of give. And I'm so lucky, I've worked with Impact for a while now that I know some of the fellow clients. I try to give them a little crap. I gave Ian crap because I know him. And I was like, you're getting us into it, Ian, because he was making fun comments. I was like, before you start any more trouble, I have to ask you a question. Or I also think it's really nice for the panelists too, because then they feel validated. Because sometimes the audience is just kind of zoned in, or we have an 11 a.m. Saturday morning panel, so everyone's the caffeine's still kicking in. And that's where I love where my background in producing and writing can come in, because I actually know what they're talking about. So I'm like, yes, that's really interesting because X, Y, Z.
Well, it allows you to improvise. If you understand story and structure, you can kind of roll with it. All right, now you also do red carpets and press.
I do.
Yeah. Now that one's very challenging because they get the same question 45 times often. What do you like to do to make it a little fresh, give them something a little interesting without putting much pressure on them?
I love red carpets. It's like a game to me. I mean, you're like, I want this person. We're getting this, me and my camera guy, we're getting this person. What I try to do is ask them one really elegant question about process, because I studied acting way back when. Again, I'm a writer, I'm a producer. I know what it's like to make a film instead of just being some, rando. So I try to ask them really thoughtful questions, and I'd rather just one really interesting, thoughtful question than, are you excited to be here? Or actually, that's kind of fun too, just being vibe check. That's a fun way to take the pressure off, and then if I can engage someone from there, I try to ask them, again, rather just how does it feel to be nominated? Let's actually talk about your performance.
Yeah. All right, so I know you love all your children, all the people you've edited, they're like children to you.
Yes.
But was there one that kind of you really enjoyed, something special, or even if you got a really special moment out of, you know what, this was kind of...
I think, who was really special was Carey Mulligan.
Ah.
I got to speak with Carey Mulligan at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and it was that moment where the PR people are shunting her off. I was like, please. And she was just so sweet. She's such a girl's girl, because I was asking her questions. She was so engaged. And then actually another journalist I felt like he was on riser, so that's why I'm going like this. He was above me, and he tried to cut me off, and she answered him, and she came right back to me.
Aww.
And that meant a lot to me, because she could tell I cared, and I hope my questions were interesting enough that she's like, yeah, whatever, and then came, and she was just a respectful queen.
All right, a lot of people don't know about the Karen Mildrenberg, first woman athlete who made $1 million.
That's right.
Forefront. What made you want to come on board to tell us, to compose for this very interesting story?
The story is so interesting, like you said. Such strong characters. There's a huge history there with all these female wrestlers that kind of started this community and got the sport really off the ground from carnivals out into these huge stadiums. And her journey was really extraordinary. And one of those things where they say it's like stranger than fiction, like her whole story and the drama they went through. It's like you can't write this stuff. Like it's amazing and wild, the kind of things she went through. And so it was just a blast to come alongside that and kind of figure out a theme for her and what her world sounds like and what her journey sounds like and her emotional and character arcs and try and tell her story through music. It was such a blast.
It's interesting because you have a time period of the 30s to the 50s.
Yeah.
And mixing with wrestling, that must be kind of interesting composing challenge.
It was.
Because they're, not think you linked necessarily. You would think it automatically linked.
I know. I mean, we really went into this with like an idea to capture the sound of the South and the intensity of the wrestling. So we used a ton of kind of a mixture of blues, folk, Americana, like a lot of soloist instruments, some really heavy strumming guitars and banjo and percussion to kind of match the vibe of the carnivals in the beginning. And so it wasn't this big orchestral production. It was like these dirty strumming guitars and banjos and percussion building up the intensity. And then as our journey went on, we added in the big orchestra, we added in the big strings, and we started with a single fiddle and then added a huge string ensemble to playing her theme at the very end. So it really grew with her organically.
All right, was there any, no pun intended, was there anything you wrestled with, the most challenging thing you had to wrestle with to a scene or sequence?
What was challenging? I mean, it was probably the most fun I've had on a project. There wasn't a ton of challenges. We did incorporate the director, Ash, had an idea to incorporate Dust in the Wind for this main relationship theme between her and this character, G-Bill. And so we incorporated this whole Dust in the Wind theme that we eventually made a whole cover out of, and we had Corey Taylor sing on it, Bad Omens sing on it. And so we started in a scene, just in an intimate scene between them, and he thought, what if we just throw in Dust in the Wind here, and we can recur it back later on? So that was a super fun challenge, but it was kind of a fun challenge. There was not too many things that were super hard about it. It was just a constant collaboration that was just a blast. Honestly, it was fun.
So you think it just starts with a good script, then you can kind of have fun with the music?
Yeah, good collaborators, good script, good ideas, back and forth, and kind of blending those styles in with the orchestral stuff later, and that's kind of how we did it.
What was it about Paris' Fall that made you want to come on board?
I mean, a lot. I'm a big fan of the movies.
Yeah.
They're popcorn movies, easy to watch, kind of my guilty pleasure. I have a relationship with a production company, and we work on a lot of their projects. So they told us about Paris Has Fallen quite early on, and I'm always like, yeah, I'll do it with them because they work on pretty cool shows.
What was most fun and or challenging to be able to evolve the music through the whole entire season?
Yeah, the thought of that was daunting. Even coming from films that already have music set and having to reset that for the TV series. But basically each episode is a movie. There are big set pieces, big emotional set pieces in each episode that kind of differentiates each episode. So kind of allowed us to treat them as individual movies, basically. So a lot of work, but we treated them separately. We have some themes in some episodes that don't appear in other episodes.
That's that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because then you're not tied to necessarily honoring the film, or you can kind of expand and do things you didn't normally do.
Yeah. And we have an overarching theme which is around the villain, Jacob Pierce, played by Sean Harris in the show. That comes back every episode. So it allows, we have the backbone basically for the series, and then several themes are kind of bespoke to the episode.
All right, so was there one maybe theme or sequence or scene that was especially challenging, but you're like, oh my God, I'm so excited that we pulled this one off?
There were many. One of the most challenging was this sequence in episode 3. They're basically stuck in a bridge in Paris, and the bad guy is on a bus. I think it's episode 2 or 3. It's episode 3, and they're trying to basically do a little sting operation to get him. And the reason why it was complicated because the director was very specific on the pacing of the edit and the way, how much space he wanted between kind of like stabs or building tension. And I swear we did about 15, 16 different versions of that scene to get to where the director was like, that's perfect. Like even like half a second longer holding that note, you know, dropping this thing after it, you hear the Foley bang and the sound effects, just massaging it for weeks to get it to that place.
I know you must love all your music, but that must have been really rewarding when you saw it. Like, you know, you worked so hard on it, and it really paid off collaborating with the director on that one.
Yeah, definitely. But also, as you say, like, yes, I enjoy writing the music, but I actually love that collaboration that pushes you in a different direction and creates something that's completely original. Because I wouldn't have done that if I did it on my own without any direction from the director. So yeah, I love that.
Very important people. Mm-hmm. That must have been a very interesting casting challenge.
Oh,
yes. You have to find a comedian who doesn't know what they're playing and the ability to play it.
Yes. It's exactly it. So you also have to find people that are just willing to do it because it's like, you know, it's outside their comfort zone. A lot of comedians don't like to do that. They know what they're good at and then they stick in that same lane. But we also want people that are just going to have fun with it. So like, and they're going to just take the character wherever, and it could be as outrageous as they want or, you know, or as internal as they want, so whatever they want to do. So I was talking about it on the panel. Danielle Pinnock was like my favorite of this season because she took it just to a way, like a place you never expected, a dominatrix fairy, like who does that? so much fun. It's such a great show to cast.
So then for something like that, so you don't have like, oh, this person's perfect. You just need somebody that you think is flexible.
Yeah.
Like someone that, you know what, they're open, they can kind of roll with it.
Yeah.
You know, you give them a note and say, do this, and they can kind of do it in a way you might not expect.
Exactly. They have to have some sort of flexibility, but they also have to have some sort of improv background. So when I'm casting it, I'm obviously bringing in our, you know, our usual suspects in terms of the dropout world. So we always have Anna Garcia on every season. You know, we have Brennan on our season. But then we try to infuse new comedians into the world. So when we had like Danielle come on, we had Nicole Byer come on, we had Bobby Moynihan come on, you know, they had fun with it. They just were like, you know, I don't get to do this very often. I still do improv, but I don't do it in a character space. So it's a lot of fun.
It's interesting because it's a nice blend of reality and narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's kind of like your two passions. So was that kind of fun to be able to combine both in one night?
Yeah, that's what I loved. That's why I was so drawn to doing this show, was because I got to combine all my passions, but also work with comedians that I've been growing up and watching my entire life. So it was truly a dream come true.
What made you want to come on board to the show, which has a little more edge than we used to see?
Well, I mean, the chance to work with Kevin Hart, the greatest, biggest comedy star in the world, was too great to pass up. He's such a dynamic and funny character and a guy, and this show is based on his stories of his life growing up with his mom and his uncle and his dad, and it just instantly said, "Oh, this is a really funny animated show." And then once Matt and I were not. I didn't know Matt until we started working on this together. They kind of put us together, and we just hit it off right away and just had a really great time working on it.
I have a few. What drew you to want to do the show?
Oh, other than Kevin, just the fact to do a show. I grew up loving animation, Fat Albert and Cosby Kids, a lot of shows that like really was my life, watching TV, you know, being a latchkey kid and everything. And we wanted to make one of those types of shows that we watched Saturday morning. I mean, we know it's an adult animated show, but it is a kid in it, and so that's what kind of drew me to it, is just to work with Kevin and also to do a show that would be impactful for this next generation.
Now, for Kevin, it's obviously he's hysterical. We all know that. But he's also going to be a little more vulnerable because it's his life. This is something like, you know, as an artist, just being funny is not enough. He's opening up his soul and sharing with you. How is that process working with him, kind of going deeper into, you know, Kevin Hart?
Well, he was incredibly supportive of us. You know, when we first started working on it, we saw everything he did. We watched all his stand-ups. We read his book. He had a documentary, you know, another series where he went back to his neighborhood just to sort of see, like, okay, who is this guy beyond who we see, you know, on stage? And he was incredibly supportive of us, and we would send him ideas, and we'd listen to him and tell us, like, this is what he wanted to do. But we would send him ideas, and he'd always write back, that sounds great. You know, he was incredibly behind us at all time, every step of the way, and just a real great collaborator in that way. A star who let us do our thing, and he did his thing.
Yeah, he trusts us, which sometimes doesn't happen, and we value that trust. So we eventually got the studio network done to know we know how to take this train and go with it. And once we all got on board and started building it out and started getting animatics back and everything, and people just felt like, you know what, we have something special here.
And so is there something, what do you enjoy most about animation? Working in animation, is it more freeing? Is there something you really like as a storytelling device?
I think it is freeing to a certain degree where there's things you can do in animation that you can't do in live action. But I think from the point of view of a writer or showrunner or producer, there's a chance to really craft it in a way that you might not be able to do if you were shooting, let's say, for instance, like a 3-camera audience sitcom, or even a single-camera show, where we're able to get in and work with the animation team, work with the editors, and even with this show, we were creating an entire world, which is always fun, like on a new show. Like it was so much fun working with the animation team to discover, like, okay, what do the characters look like? What do the backgrounds look like? It was just, that's the kind of thing that, you know, if we were making this live action, we'd put a camera in the middle of Philadelphia and start filming, but we had a chance to sort of shape the world, the look and the feel of the show from square one.
Right. And like before, like in live action, the showrunners don't get to like act with the actors, but in animation, we're in a booth, a sound booth, and we're interacting with them. So we read the lines with the actors and get to act and get into it more. And to me, I feel like that's something that you bring about so many more jokes and so many more opportunities to see things a different angle when you're acting it out with the other actors.
What was it about the project that made you want to come on board?
Down to Earth was crazy. So I do mostly social and environmental justice documentaries. Anything that is good noise is what I call it. Anything that either elevates or inspires or I hate the word educate because that's boring.
Yeah.
But Down to Earth, you know, it had a great person like Zach, who some people think he's just a pretty face, but he's actually quite endearing and intelligent. And he wanted to kind of create something that was beautiful and interesting and entertaining, but also might educate a little bit on how we can do better on this planet, how we can treat recycling and the environment and each other and our own personal health. So that's why I did it, and also because I was lucky enough to know the executive producer.
Oh, that's always good. What I like about it, obviously, the environmental theme is what I most like, but I do like the fact that different locations and different aspects. So it was interesting to be able to explore the different sides of it, not just one area of it. More round. I felt it was more rounded.
Yeah, season 1 was the season I did. I wasn't available for 2, but season 1 was amazing because every episode was a different country, and some people were wondering why we didn't do an episode here in the United States, and I tried to explain that wasn't the point. It was to get outside of ourselves, because there are these amazing countries that are doing these amazing things, or even not new things, these great traditions, like in Sardinia, where people live way beyond 100 for generations. Yeah. Why is that? And so to be able to have the opportunity to go to all these different countries, mostly because we had a very small crew, because budgetary-wise. Yeah. But yeah, it was amazing being able to have a different location every episode. And it also, since I was the music supervisor as well, gave me the opportunity to use different kinds of music and different genres for every episode, which you don't usually get to do.
Was there one episode that was particularly challenging, but you're like, ooh, I'm so excited I pulled this one off?
Yes. Oh, no. Yes. No. Yes. Well, there's so many different answers to that. There was one that was in Peru, and it was shot in the Amazon.
Oh.
And a lot of our crew got deathly ill from the water or from whatever, or it was just hot. And so you didn't have those 2 camera shoots, you know, where you're having different cutaways and all kinds of lovely things. You had to try and find a way to work around it to tell the story and show the misery without turning off the viewer, so they're still engaged and want to watch. But I think the hardest one would have been, God, that's a really good question. The hardest one would have been, maybe France, because there was a ton of locations all over the country, and the final location was in Lourdes, France, which was a sacred space. It was very religious, and so we had to be very mindful.
No.
And so there wasn't a lot of loud talking or multiple cameras. We had to kind of sneak around and shoot and be very respectful. And so in edit, that meant there was a lot less to work with. But yeah, I really liked it.
So we're going to talk a little interviewing. You did a wonderful panel.
Thank you.
What do you enjoy most about researching, preparing for a panel with so many different types of artists?
Oh, I think it's so exciting because it's like, you know, if you're a person that loves film and loves details, it's just like each nugget of knowledge from each person is vital, you know, and then you as a filmmaker take all of that, and now I know that and can be a better artist because of it. But then it's hard to be a moderator because I just want to listen to everyone. So I learned today, you gotta send it along a little bit. But I was just like, I just want to listen to them. So,
Interesting.
you know, we're learning.
That's interesting because I wanted to ask you about the artists say. So do you feel a lot of times that your skills of this and actually almost learning from their mistakes too, artists make mistakes, has really helped you in your own creative ventures?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. For sure. Yeah, I'm just, you know, trying to absorb all of it.
All right, so not your daddy's films, I do want to talk about, because you showcase women and non-binary, give an opportunity to show their voices not heard.
Yes.
Given the climate now, what have been the challenges trying to get these voices heard?
You know, it's a challenge every single day, but it's always been, you know, so at least now we're growing faster. People are starting to know about us. We're starting to get a lot more like respect in the industry. So it's a little bit easier for us to get an incredible like panelist or people on the podcast, or I would say that's how it's changed, but it's a constant fight every day.
But the advantage of your thing is you've had such a community now being built for so long.
Yeah.
Now it's just spreading out.
Right. And now at least we can fight together.
But we're going to talk about Companion.
Okay.
What was your initial reaction when you first read the script?
I was blown away by the script. It was very funny. It was incredibly entertaining, and it was very character-driven. I love the trajectory of the Iris character, of what she goes through, how she changes, how she surmounts these obstacles, and I was so looking forward to the opportunity to do it. I was very surprised when I began talking to my director, Drew, about it, and I was like, let's talk about the tone of this thing, because it has this capability of, on the script, it reads very funny, and we could make the film seem very broad in its sensibility, but where do you come down on the execution of this? Like on a sliding scale of silly, how silly is this movie? And he said, well, from a scale from 1 to 10, I see this movie on a -10 on the silly scale. Like, I see this movie as more of like a David Fincher like thriller. Like, there are comedy components in it, sure, but I don't really want to lean into that genre. I want to be a bit more dry with it. And the comedy will, I think, happen naturally through the casting and some of the script, but like, I don't want to lean into it. It didn't necessarily pan out that way. we start shooting, and we have these great actors, Rupert Friend, Harvey Guillen, Sophie, Jack. These are comedic heavyweights. And so they're interpreting this material that Drew has written very eloquently, and the film takes on this new breadth. It evolves, it changes. And then we had a meeting. We got shut down for the strikes. We came back after the strike was resolved, and Drew was like, I think I want to lean into like what my actors are giving me. They're giving me something that's really fun, big, entertaining. Let's open the tone up a little bit, and let's explore, I think, what you were seeing initially in that script.
One of the challenges was, we know at the beginning Iris is going to kill him.
Yeah.
But so you're giving away the end, but it's her journey that is what we discovered. What were the challenges of kind of like giving away the ending, but kind of developing the story, a different kind of style we weren't expecting?
That is a great question, and the reason because it's a great question is that was not the intended line. When Drew first wrote the script, instead of Iris saying the day I killed him, it was initially the day he killed me. So the movie in its rough cut form existed for several months, where when Iris is giving that open narration, she says, the day he killed me, and your first impression of Iris is that this woman is a victim. Something something terrible is going to happen to her, and you're a little anxious, you're a little on edge for when is it going to happen, how is it going to happen, is it Josh? Is Josh somehow, she mentioned Josh is going to kill her, how has this happened? And so you're trying to reconcile those ideas. And we got to a testing phase where we start showing it to friends and family, and it was from a friend and a colleague of mine, Mike Flanagan, the director of Haunted of Hill House, All House of Usher. He raised his hand and he's like, I really love this cut, I think it's works on so many levels. I have an idea. Change that opening line from the day he killed me to the day I killed him. It's like one of those light bulb ideas that took a while for all of us in editorial to kind of imagine, like, what would be the consequences of telling the audience that, like, she does this? And we discovered that, like, your first impression of Iris is someone that is very affable, loving, shy, meek, and then to tell the audience, like, she's going to become a killer by the end of the movie, it makes you lean forward a little bit. You're like, I don't believe you. How is this possible? I can't reconcile what you've just told me with what I see. So it made you lean forward a little bit. It made you question what you were watching. It gave it a bit more of this inquisitive thriller, cerebral component where you don't know if you can really believe everything you hear. But we weren't even sure about this all the way up until the end of post. We got to the end of editorial, and fortunately, the film was testing well. Audiences were really liking it, but Drew was like, I'm not sure about that line. Like, it's so interesting, like, how that little kernel of something can change an entire perception. So he was even teasing the idea with New Line to, like, can we have 2 separate test screenings? Can we have one test screening with the day I killed him, and the other one with the day he killed me? And we debated back and forth quite a bit, and eventually he landed on what ended up in the final film.
I think it's a great. We have a lot of student editors that watch. It's a great lesson for student editing. How a thing can change. One little thing can change the whole entire tone and the feel of a film.
The ripple effects of it are quite surprising and a little intimidating. Like, you realize the power of something like that.
Now, one of the other challenges for me, I'm assuming, is Josh, because we have to like him for a while. You know, oh my God, why is she going to kill him? We have to kind of root for him in some way. What was the challenge about him? When did you make him show his dark side? Like, how did you want to balance? Like, we want to keep him interested, but at some point we got to show that he's bad.
That's also something we had to question in the editing room as well. We had several other takes of Jack Quaid being a bit more of a douche. We have other alt takes where he's a bit more grumpy and a bit more, you know, he's a little more, not angry, so to say, with Iris in the beginning, but a bit more curmudgeon-y. And it was a decision that we found, it was a thing that we found through the process of editing the film, where if you make Josh really affable at the beginning, kind of an aloof, kind of this a little uncomfortable in his own skin, a bit insecure, it also forces you to ask, why would Iris kill this guy? He seems harmless.
Right.
It then, as the film progresses and you see the levels of menace that this guy subtly begins to unveil, you become a bit more emotionally involved, because you're like, this guy didn't read to me so much as a villain, but the more he talks about his relationship with Iris, the more you learn about how he really feels about her, the more you see him interact with Kat and the way he treats everybody around him, you gradually begin to hate this guy more and more and more. So I think it was a balance of, you know, surprising the audience, of making them lean forward and question what they were seeing, but also, you know, we're not necessarily trying to make them likable, but I think my goal in the editing room is to make you empathize with the characters. Drew writ such wonderfully rendered three-dimensional characters, and although, yes, Jack Quaid plays a really despicable villain in this movie, I still want you to ask, what would you do in his point of view? Like, what would you do in his shoes?
I like the touch of having the other couple, robot human, actually turn out to be nice. Like, loving. Was that such a choice you wanted? You wanted to kind of make it, you know, a little interesting nuance to it?
Well, my goal with the entire material was to make sure that the audience connects with Iris from the get-go and stays connected with her the entire time. We always viewed it internally in the editing room, Drew, myself, my collaborators, as an emancipation story. It's a story about an individual getting out of a toxic relationship. Someone that finds courage, someone that finds self-reliance, someone that finds the ability to stand up for herself, to remove herself from something that is gone very sour. So it's about a story about someone finding their own inner power. The fact that it happens to be an AI story and a robot story we almost kind of treat it as like external trappings. Like it's fun because it subverts a lot of your expectations. And even when Drew started writing Companion, he viewed it as, I'm going to make Iris the bad guy. I'm going to make Iris the one that you that is going to wreak havoc in this estate. But the more he wrote her, right, he was, I think, a few pages in or almost to the halfway point where he was like, I find myself connecting more with this nervous robot than anybody else in the cast, than anybody else in the characters. She wants to be accepted. She's shy. She wants to be loved. I have more in common with her than anybody else.
Question, what made you want to come on board for What We Do in the Shadows?
I mean, I feel very lucky to be brought on board. So when that opportunity was offered to me, actually, the person that I got to mix with on this project, Diego Gat, was a mixer that asked me to be sound effects mixer on this final season. And when he asked, when the opportunity presented itself, I obviously could not say no because I've been a fan of the show for the previous 5 seasons. So very lucky to get to work on the final season.
Okay, so I know vampires can't be seen in the mirror, but I'm not sure if
Right.
they can be audio recorded. I'm not sure.
Yes.
What are the challenges of doing sound for vampires?
I think, if anything, it was just very fun because there was not, like, you get to kind of just make up your own rules a little bit, especially, and most part of it is, like, really what our filmmakers, our director, Yana, and our producer, Paul and Sam, like, what their vision is, how they like things to sound. And I think because I step in for the finale season, there's so much soundscape and quality to the show has already been established by the wonderful mixers that were previously on the show. So a lot about my job for the final season is to really honor that and keep what's already been the signature sound of the show. And then for any new elements, then I get to go and be creative and play things loud, play things bold, because it's a comedy and we get to just have fun.
So you have a good foundation, but it does allow you the improvisation, so to speak.
It does a lot, and I think one of the most fun things, because it's a mockumentary show, so like we do acknowledge the camera and the crews on set and the production sound people especially. So when they are interacting with like the boom guy in the show, I actually, if the boom guy is physically hurt or harmed in any type of way, I actually drop on my sound and cut out all sounds, sometimes bits and pieces, to make you feel like, oh, we're really with the camera crew there. Yeah.
All right, so was there any particular sequence or scene that was most challenging that strikes you from the past season?
I think definitely. So in episode 9, it was just the busiest episode. We were trying to pay homage to the movie The Warriors. There's so many. So we have like vampire gangs. So we got like motorcycle gangs coming in. We got vampires that are baristas that are fighting and fist fighting in a coffee shop. And then at the same time, there will be like a swirl of bats that are flying above the sky to kind of find them. So I think just so much sound, complicated sound effects that's happening at the same, all at the same time, to maintain the clarity of the story point and the dialogue was a big challenge, and we spent a lot of time on it. And I'm very proud with what we come up with in the end. Yeah.
When did you know you wanted to be professional working in sound? When was the moment?
I think I knew probably when I was 18 years old. Actually, I was in college. I grew up in a family that very much encouraged music, so I grew up a musician myself. I tried pursuing a music career, and then through pursuing it, music career and also having a passion of film, I found there's a career in post-production in doing sound. And then once I found that out, I pretty much fell in love, and I stick to doing that ever since.
Gotham. We never really gotten to see Gotham like this in the series.
Right.
Like any other Batman iteration. What was the process for you to be able to kind of build this world?
It was a dream experience. I think because we were given quite a lot of latitude. The movie, the Batman by Matt Reeves, definitely set up the tone, right? It set up that color palette, the darkness, the look. But, it's a 2-hour movie, right? And now we get to live in this world for 8 hours. And that gave us a lot more room to say, hey, what does this neighborhood look like? What is, the places that are only mentioned, but now we actually get to go there. And how do we differentiate it from the familiar parts of Gotham? So we were in Crown Point for a lot of our story, which was the hardest hit part of Gotham. And what does that feel like, right? It's not your classic tall skyscrapers, but it's like the forgotten part of town with the skyscrapers behind it, and it was just a dream. We were Manhattan we filmed in Manhattan, which stood in for Gotham, which is just a dream. Like to be able to shoot in Manhattan and use it for everything it's worth was just a perfect starting point for
One
us.
of my favorite aspects was obviously we saw the Batman film and watched Gotham, get destroyed fundamentally, and that was just like, oh great, we see that. But how has it really got to explore what would happen? A destruction of a city.
Yeah.
How was that process kind of like in the world and of course building the Penguins lair, but showing the real world consequences.
Right. So the whole story arc of the Penguin is fundamentally hinged on the aftermath of the events of the movie. So we had to definitely acknowledge it. We couldn't just say, oh, reset button, this is Gotham. The whole story was about what happens after such a disaster. So we had to embrace, what does it look like 2 weeks after a flood? What does it look like in neighborhoods that don't have the money to recover from it? That kind of continuity is rare to get to revel in. And also when it's all there to support the characters, to tell us, what type of background does Victor come from? What is the Falcons? What does their home look like? Right, deep in. We filmed in Long Island, but we just got to take it further from where we were in the film and embrace that destruction not as eye candy or not just a spectacle, but know that those shots of destroyed Gotham are part of our story.
One of the things I like Arkham's Asylum. My favorite episode of Sophia's Descent into Hell. What was that process like building that? Because we haven't really seen Arkham in kind of like how it operates, but how was that process for that?
Right. So the movie established just a handful of Arkham shots. So our production designer pretty much ran with that design. The one interior hallway they had, and we made a whole labyrinth of those hallways. And for the exterior, that came to me of, well, what does this look like from afar? And in episode 1 and 2, the Penguin, Oz is watching from afar. And we were just given a lot of creative, as long as we embraced the tone of the show that, this is not an opulent city. This is a city that's seen better times. And so when we visualize Arkham or even Blackgate Prison, it was always about not to be grandiose, but almost treat it like if all went well, it would have been grandiose. But given the corruption that happens in a city like this, what do half-finished projects look like? What does a prison look like when the budget was probably cut halfway through?
Did you, as a visual effects artist, want to sneak in Victor not dying at the end? Maybe change the director's vision? Because I love the scene, and I understand story-wise, but it was such a tragic moment.
It was tragic, and the ending. The original ending is no, I can't say it. The ending was quite tragic, and maybe the most unexpected scene, I think, in the whole show. I gotta tell you, the one question I asked my friends after they've seen the whole show was, do you think Oz took Victor to that park to do the deed? Did he plan it, or did he decide to do that halfway through the conversation?
He had to. He can't have that vulnerability. That's why dramatically I think it's so brilliant.
Right.
And I agree with the twist, but it's sad because we love Victor. We love their relationship.
Yes. But that's what's so powerful about that scene. You can still look at it and ask yourself.
A lot of questions. Did he really plan it or not?
Did he plan it? That lonely bench in the middle of nowhere?
Did it dawn on him right there that I can't be this vulnerable?
Or is it after Victor said, you're like family? Maybe that was a thing? I don't know, but that's what great writing is, and we're so just happy to be part of that and to contribute visually to those written words. What a dream.
Okay, Star Trek Discovery. What made you want to come on board initially?
Star Trek, right there, first two words. I love all things Trek. I'm a huge science fiction reader. I have been since I was a little kid, and the ideas in Star Trek are some of the most worthwhile ideas, I think, that are being told in all of media. The idea of a progressive, positive future. There is a ton of really interesting, dark, dystopic futures that are being told all over the place, and they're exciting as hell. I mean, I love them. You know, like Fallout, and I mean, there's a lot of great stuff, but very rarely is it painting a picture of a world that's significantly better than the one we live in right now. And I've got two little kids. I've just been attracted to the idea that through science and cooperation and empathy and creativity, we can live in a world that's better than the one we've got right now. And Star Trek's one of the only places that's telling that story. And so to get the chance to play with all the filmmaking tools, you know, as an editor, as a director, and coming in and visual effects and actors' performance and camera work and sound, and to use all those really fun tools to tell a story that's really exciting and worthwhile to tell. I'm a true believer. I drank the Kool-Aid. I love it. I love it.
Star Trek's about to turn 60 very soon, which is amazing. Now, there's obviously a very strong brand. They have a very strong image of what Star Trek should be. But Discovery, to me, is also one of the more interesting shows that lets you kind of honor that, but also deviate from it. How do you feel about the balance between, you know, honoring Star Trek brand, but also doing the creativity you guys get to do on Discovery?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's been a long time since there's been. When Discovery was new, it had been about 10 years at least since Enterprise, I think, at that point. And there had been kind of a dearth of episodic television Star Trek. And obviously, television is where Star Trek started. And during those 10 years, I think the medium made some major leaps in terms of its evolution of storytelling. And so by the time Star Trek Discovery was getting ready to launch, so to speak, you had... in the zeitgeist, you had serialized storytelling was really becoming the norm, and you had these really rich character-driven dramas that were out in the world, and the idea of the episodic story of the week was becoming less and less prevalent. And so I think that I think Star Trek Discovery came in with a really exciting and interesting character-centric idea of this. We're going to take this character who's not the captain yet, and we're going to go on her journey of going from a crew member to a mutineer, to a prisoner, to a first officer, to a captain. I mean, really, she went on this whole journey, and the audience went with her. But that was very different from what Star Trek had done before, because Star Trek had always been episodic. It had been, you know, the ship and the crew, and we're encountering something alien and weird, and we're going to solve this problem every week. And so I think Discovery played with that. I do think that one of the things that came out of Discovery was obviously, as much as I love the show, and I think the audience enjoyed it, I think the Strange New Worlds evolved out of the filmmaking of Star Trek Discovery, because I think the filmmakers and I think the people at Paramount and the filmmakers involved said, you know, there is still very much an appetite for the episodic, or a more episodic story of, like, let's deal with a catastrophe of the week. Right. And so, but it's interesting because I think Discovery sort of took the evolution of where storytelling was and you know, told its version, and then from that evolved sort of a hybrid, which I think is what, I haven't worked on Strange New Worlds, so I can only speak about it as a fan, but Strange New Worlds is very much a combination of episodic and serialized storytelling.
Yes. So the finale, you got to do the finale. How was that, saying goodbye to the show and wrapping everything up?
There were a lot of tears. You know, the director on that episode, Olatunde, is one of my mentors. He's a friend. He's just a brilliant guy. And he was our directing producer for the whole run of Discovery. And he was very much a father figure. I mean, I think Olatunde and Alex are both, you know, they both kind of are father figures for the whole show. And then you had Sonequa, who I'm in awe of her, honestly, as a person. She's like, you turn the cameras off and you get her. She has so much integrity and so much talent and so much kindness that you had a very kind and considerate and loving set, I'd go so far as to say, and crew. So that final episode was kind of heartbreaking because to work in television, you don't always get a crew and a cast that, by and large, are all just wonderful people that you want to spend all your time with anyway. And to have that be the final episode, it was wonderful because it was a celebration. But I think we were heartbroken to be done telling the story of Discovery in general because it was something that we all loved, but also the chance to work with those people on a daily basis. And a lot of them we'll still interact with and work together on other projects. But that family broke up a little bit, and it was sad. You know, I mean, it really there really were. There were tears.
All right, so we're gonna go some Cobra Kai. So what made you want to come on board initially?
They asked us.
Yes.
They asked us, and we said, okay, that sounds great. I'd love to get hired. We just wanted a job.
We thought it was just kind of it's interesting because when we first learned about the project, we didn't really know how connected it was to the original movies. We thought maybe it was going to be some kind of reboot. It wasn't until we read the script that we realized that it's actually this continuation of this story. And I think we just immediately responded to kind of the emotional arc of that, this like following characters like in a later stage of their life, but also just the 80s aesthetic got us pretty jacked.
Yeah.
And
it was kind of the awakening of what we call like our brands now, which is this kind of like higher concept idea that we normally just go really hard with, and it takes on a life of its own. And the show kind of felt like it had that energy even from episode 1, that it was going to be like a larger than life project. So, I mean, we were thrilled. It was our break, you know, like it was a big deal for us. And that was 8 years ago we got hired on that.
Now, how much of it, since it's you have the Karate Kid, a film that everybody loves and is very iconic, how much of it is like you want to pay homage to the original? You know, at the same time, you got to create your own distinct sound. So what was the balance in the music trying to do that?
It's definitely a balance. I mean, there's like, you're trying to tap in, I think, for us into the same emotions that people would feel if they were watching the original. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to do the same thing, but you need to kind of understand where it is you're trying to get the audience emotionally and in terms of story investment, and then like make decisions that lead them to the same place. So like we use a totally different palette than the Karate Kid movies, but like it's kind of influenced by it in certain ways to create the same response.
For you, what was the most fun about evolving it over series episodes? A lot of times people they come on for an episode too. You got to actually be a part of it for a longer period.
65 episodes. We were on for 65 episodes. Every season got crazier and crazier and crazier. And at the end of every season finale, we were like, how the hell are we going to do this for another season? And you know what?
We always do.
We always did it because we were always inspired. Everything on there, we were just fans of the show. And that, in turn, made us so excited to score the show. Everyone on it, John, Josh, and Hayden, who created it, were so supportive of our crazy vision for the music. I mean, by the end of it, we started off with kind of just bass drums and guitar, and by the end of it, we had an operatic choir. We had a full Wagnerian-sized orchestra. We had synthesizers, and we had, still our bass drums, guitar. We had we had Korean instruments everywhere. It was just a dream come true project. We were very creatively fulfilled.
And last question, is there any particular moment or sequence or scene you're like, this was really hard, but so rewarding when we pulled it off?
Can we spoil?
Yeah, if we
you can do a past one if you want, or it's up to you if you don't want to spoil something. It's up to you.
I mean, we can spoil. There's episode 10 of the 6th season, so 10 out of 15, is there's about 20 straight minutes of fighting that happen between every single dojo that you get introduced to at the Sekai Tekai, which is this global karate tournament. And so we just brought in kind of thematically all the different music from all the different characters in dojos and like have them go at it for 15 straight minutes.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
it was a lot of work.
It was a lot of fighting, a lot of karate fighting on that show. It's actually pretty wild.
All right, so Star Trek Unification, what made you want to tell this story?
I have to give credit to the writer, Jules Surback. I have been working on 3 previous shorts, Star Trek shorts with him. And this one was just something he wanted to give to the fans. He wanted to do something that just felt honest and felt sincere, and I always love. That was something that I definitely wanted to get behind and do the best that I could. So on my end, I just wanted to make sure that whatever I was contributing to it felt honest. And that's why, I drew from personal things, personal family, in hopes that when people watch Unification, they will care about this Kirk and Spock, meeting, final meeting, as much as I would care about my own family and my own parents.
Well, I mean, Kirk and Spock go back 60 years practically, and there is no on-screen friendship that we've ever seen like that. What were the challenges of working with Shatner and the Nimoy family to want to preserve that? How did you want to approach it? What was the biggest thoughts of how we want to make sure we have to honor this? Because the fans desperately wanted that moment.
Yeah. So much of that was a long process, in the sense of, Otoi, which is the company that worked with Paramount Pictures, they did a lot of back and forth with both states. In terms of making sure that everybody was happy with it. And I think part of it was also, do we have something worth it to say? Because otherwise, I don't think anybody would have been wanting to be involved. So I think a big part of the Unification was being truthful to, okay, we are doing this for the right reasons. We're not doing this to make a commercial. We're not doing this to sell a TV show. We're doing this because we believe in the characters. We believe in the history and the legacy of it. And that was the most meaningful part for me.
And what was William Shatner's biggest concerns? Or what was he like, I want to make sure that we do it right? What was his thoughts?
There was a few check-ins with him, and I think he wanted to make sure that all this new technology was being used for the right reasons and with the right purpose, like the de-aging. If Kirk, we're going to go back, let's make sure that it's done for the right reasons. And I think that's very important in general. It's not using technology because you can use technology, but use it because you have something important to say.
Okay, so what was it about Heretic that made you want to come on board?
Wow. Well, first and foremost, I'd already worked with the directors, Scott and Brian, on Haunt, one of their earlier movies. And so when Heretic came up, on the boards, as they say, they reached out to me and I was available for work, and it's like, oh my God, of course, I love working with them. So, and then I read the script. They sent me the script. I read the script, and of course, the script was amazing. So it was an amazing project to be part of.
Now, the dungeon was kind of scary. I've been in those, so I could totally relate to those characters. Now, what were the challenges for that? Because you needed to make it horrifying, but also real, something that we feel we could be in, so you couldn't push it that far. What were your thoughts on how to create that look and,
Yeah, the sets were amazing. Very much claustrophobic.
Yeah.
It felt like you were in a dungeon for sure, except there's also 20 people in there behind the camera, so it's that much tighter. Everything was so realistic. You really felt like it was happening.
And the prosthetics especially, though. You had to make that feel horrific, but real.
Right. So with the different characters, the prophets especially, Mrs. Reed, I guess, comes out as. We had to change these women into these emaciated, bony. They're kept in cages, so they're all creaking and everything you can imagine. So we worked long and hard to kind of create that look with the directors, and the prosthetics we came up with really kind of had to facilitate that.
Yeah.
And obviously, we kind of rooting for Hugh Grant to die at the end of the movie. We do love Hugh Grant, usually.
We do.
What was it like when you finally got to stab and kind of kill him off? What was your thoughts on that?
Well, Hugh's always great. It's the first time I met him, and it was a thrill, of course, and it was an extra thrill having to come up with gags too in his demise. And he was very, willing to wear the prosthetics that I made. And he was, very happy to do that for us. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Now, you also work on one of my favorite shows, Strange New Worlds.
Yes.
And Star Trek. For you, how has it been as a, prosthetics have been working, being able to have to create new aliens, so really every week creating a new look? How has it been even career-wise, kind of like exploring all these different characters you get to involve yourself with?
It truly is Strange New Worlds, yes. Of course, I'm a big fan growing up with Star Trek, and so aliens are very much a big part of that world. And as a fan and an artist, coming to work every day to put these aliens together is both a huge challenge, but also vastly rewarding. So, I can't say enough about that.
Now, I interviewed Christina Chung. We talked about the musical episode.
Yeah.
She lamented that she wished they could have had like a Gorn and a top hat dancing. Did you wish you could have done a Gorn prosthetic where he's top dancing and singing?
Well, that would have been very interesting. So the Gorn was a puppet and a suit, right? So I think that we could have pulled that off if a little area for.
That's interesting. Because, seriously about the Gorn though, because everybody loved the Gorn from the original series. It is one of the best episodes.
Yeah.
What were the thoughts like? What can we actually do? What do we want to change the Gorn? Like, how do we want them to look? Because people have an image of a Gorn.
Absolutely. So. From the people that actually created the Gorn and how are they going to look and because remember I'm on set, so my job is to glue on the makeups and make everybody look cool, and I was one of the puppeteers on the Gorn as well, and so the people that came up with the look of it, that's you're always fighting. The campus says, here's the 60s Star Trek, and we want that Gorn.
Yeah.
But then also you kind of have to get with the times and update things so it looks believable. Right? So they wanted, obviously to pay, service to the idea of the Gorn and what the Gorn are, the ferocity and the alienness of it. And then there's that technical aspect that you have to achieve as well.
So you just had a wonderful panel, many different artists. What do you enjoy most about doing a large panel with so many different artists?
I think with this one, I enjoyed most of the different array of departments and creative mediums in this panel. We had composers, special effect makeup artists, directors, and so it's nice to hear answers of the same question coming from each different department and kind of just getting inside the brains of all of them.
Now, you're also an artist and actor.
Right.
So when you get to these panels, what do you think is the learning process for you? We actually learn from them and kind of apply it to your own craft.
It's nice because a lot of times when I'm doing my job and I'm on set, there's not a lot of time to have a open discussion about the topics that are discussed, just because we're all doing our jobs in the moment, and so it's important that we all do that. And so it's nice to have a more casual, open discussion about things that maybe I didn't know from their perspective and vice versa. It just informs us all and makes us all better at our jobs, I think.
So you think actors would recommend that, getting a little more involved with the crew to understanding their points of view, because they actually they're all about actually helping your performance ultimately.
Absolutely. No, I could not recommend that more. I think there's a lot of stuff and communication that should happen between, let's say, an actor and a costume designer or the makeup artist, because it's a working relationship, and it's important that they do their job great for purpose of me and vice versa. And there's also things that maybe that I can do that will help them, that they can do that help me more, and so to have that open line of communication that we get to have at panels like this is really important.
Interesting you mentioned makeup artists. I talked to a lot of actors about it. You're really the first person they see in the day.
Right.
As an actor.
Right.
So is that really, what's that relation for you? Because you come in the morning, this is the one, and sometimes it's a long time.
Right.
What is the relation for you for a makeup artist, you think?
I recently had a early call time for this exact reason. It was a body paint happening. And for me, I think it's different for everybody. For me, it's a little bit of okay, this is the moment I get to relax before, the kind of job starts. And I find a little bit of a therapeutic aspect to it. I come from a little bit of a makeup artist background myself, and so I can appreciate what they're doing, and I appreciate what they do at a high level. And so it's nice. I enjoy that time.
What made you want to come aboard Agatha all along?
I've actually worked on several Marvel shows with Chris Beck, who's a dear mentor and friend of mine. And so, we worked on WandaVision together several years ago. And when they announced this, we're like, well, obviously we want to be back for this. It's such a fun world to live in, and especially her character is just really special. And I think just getting the chance to, be with her again and explore her story.
It's interesting. In WandaVision, she's a hero, villain, but not at the same time. We're following. Agatha's a little more complex in some ways.
Oh,
You had to
big
hear,
time.
what was the biggest challenge in composing for a character that's so complex?
Great question. That's something that we're really struggling with at first, because it's, with superhero stories, you're used to a certain sound or palette or a certain way the music represents that. And when we tried those ideas, it didn't work. And so, we had to take a step back, take out the French horns, take out the trumpets, take out these things that are typically associated with superheroes, and, really find out, what is actually more important for her character. And, we're on a journey of understanding her trauma and the pain that she's felt, throughout her life and all these broken relationships. And so how do we represent that? And it has to have this intimacy and this tenderness, but also, as she's on a quest to find her power, it needs to reach that zenith moment of where she's back and she's got her purple and she's you can't stop her.
So it must be kind of fun where you're breaking rules, so to speak, but you have to really redefine your own rules. That must be creating the art. So for you, going over the whole season, what was like building your own rules and creating that whole sound?
Yeah, so I think we kind of had lived in two different worlds, and so there's kind of the overall sound of the show, of the road, and this. Once we kind of nailed down that that witchiness and this dark, it's not the superhero sound, but we found this more unique, organic, broken sound for that. And then as the characters are going through these different trials, all those touch on very specific genres. And so now we're taking these themes and main ideas that we've developed, and now we're transforming them as the Coven's going through these situations. And in episode 4, when they're having the psychedelic sort of experience, now we have guitars, we have sitar, and we have instruments that you're typically associate with that sort of genre. And so each episode sort of is informed by that.
All right, so was there any particular scene or sequence where you said, this is really hard, really challenging, but you were so excited and felt rewarded, we pulled it off?
Yeah. Honestly, I think probably one of the hardest scenes was in episode 1 when, that's the episode where it's kind of making fun of the true crime TV shows.
Yeah.
And it's this very dark synth world. And then towards the end of the episode, Agatha gets to the morgue, and she goes through this transformation sequence where she sort of peels back her different layers and physically peeling back her different costumes from WandaVision. And musically, there was a struggle. That's the first time we have orchestra in there up until that point. And how do we hit all these moments of there's some comedy in it, but there's this tension, and how do you balance between those two emotions and really find this satisfying ultimate moment where she's back into her original costume. And it took a lot of versions, but I think we finally found something that worked well, and now it's one of my favorite cues.
All right, so the Watchmen. What was it about the project that made you want to come on board?
Well, I love working with director Brandon Vietti, and we both share a love for synthesizers and electronic dance music, and this is what we decided the score was going to be kind of centered in, the core sound of the score, so that was very exciting to me.
Now, it must be challenging because it's an ensemble show. There's so many characters to explore. That must be kind of interesting for the sound and the music, because you have to create different sound and music for each one.
That's true, yes.
Yeah.
A lot of different themes, and also just the world of Watchmen itself is an alternate world, and so we had to create sort of an alternate musical soundscape that matched our vision.
So that's especially challenging because you almost have to break rules and then create your own new set of rules and how you will function in the universe.
Exactly. We did have to sort of create our own world and starting from scratch with, well, the nice thing about synthesizers is that you can create sounds that have never been heard before as opposed to traditional scoring. So I've really enjoyed getting creative with that.
All right, was there any particular scene or sequence that was like, oh my God, this was really hard, but I'm so proud we pulled it off?
Yeah, I think so. If you know the Watchmen story, there's the Dr. Manhattan, and he has a backstory that has a lot of tragedy and emotion in it, and that was really hard, and we had to rewrite music a few times until we found the right tone for that. So that was challenging, and I'm glad we nailed it.
And then think about it, he is the emotional center. Like, everybody kind of revolves around him, even the backstory. So if that didn't work, it would have failed.
Right. Yeah, that was a crucial moment in the movies.
Now, do you feel like working in animation frees you up a little more than, let's say, live action?
I think so. Musically, you get to go all kinds of places, and sometimes, especially on some of the shows I worked on back in the 90s, that are comic-oriented, like Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain, you change styles on a dime, and you've got to somehow make that flow musically. So you really get to go a lot of places with music.
What was your initial reaction when you first read the script to the Uglies?
I really loved it because I worked as a key costumer on Hunger Games, and I was like, oh my God, finally a Hunger Games-like type of film that I can make my own. Because I was working under a costume designer on Hunger Games, and then this was something that I was going to lead myself and create my own.
What I like about the Uglies is it's two different worlds.
Three,
right, three. But so what was the process of you have to create three different worlds of costume? What was the challenge or the fun part that?
I mean, it was challenged because usually when you're in a project, you kind of like, you see one thing, right? Like you're like, okay, this is what's happening here. Everybody is in this world. So what was really interesting on this is that we had to really get deep into what they're feeling, right? We start with the Uglies in uniforms where they're trying to strip away their personalities. And then you go to the Smokies and they're like happy, living off nature, connecting with themselves, and they're wearing all this leather clothes and things that they've sourced out from Earth. And then you get into the Pretties, and they're like super high fashion and avant-garde, which is what we think we want, but at the same time it's very sterile and very empty. So
it's almost like you create three separate rules for each different world. And you had to revolve within the world itself.
Right, exactly, because they had total three different mindsets, and I think that's what was really cool to explore.
Was any mindset a little more challenging for you? Like which world was a little bit, you had to work a little harder to get into?
Well, I don't think none of them was harder to get into, but I think some of them had specific challenges. Of course, dressing 700 people in Pretties, it's difficult, because it's a lot of costume, a lot of things that you're trying to find that don't exist, But I think that my favorite really was where I feel like I would fit in, which would be the Smokies, living of nature, connect to yourself, and becoming an individual. So.
Now you mentioned Catching Fire. What was the experience? Now that movie and the books are really costumes are such a huge, really more character than I would argue a lot of films. What was the process of kind of learning, working on that film, kind of learning the ropes?
That film was really, really interesting. We had a wonderful costume designer, and I learned a lot because we did in that film get a lot of clothes from actual designers, so I would be on the phone at 5 a.m. with Europe every day. And they sent us a lot of archival things that don't exist. So it was very beautiful and deep, And it showed because I think the main trick of like doing a movie that's so costume heavy is the actual manufacturing of it. Because you're not necessarily given enough time or a budget to do it. So you have to kind of like just go with the flow and wing it and see where, you can cut it but not lose on the visual.
What district would you belong to?
I think maybe District 12, I guess.
12. Yeah. I wouldn't want the lumber one. That wouldn't be fun.
That wouldn't. Those are really fun to dress the extras, because they're all like specific different worlds.